Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank y'all so much for joining us for this info session where we're going to share how we harmonize organizations using our customized suite of organizational development tools that we call CODA. And yes, that's a music pun. There's going to be lots of those. Keep count if you can, and you could win a prize, that being a free enrollment in one of our upcoming courses. So there's going to be a lot of them. Stay tuned. And also another word of warning, okay? This is going to be a little bit of a whirlwind, okay? We're sharing our entire theory of change in like a little nutshell. And so it's going to be a lot. There won't be a quiz at the end, and there will be a recording. But just a note to buckle up there. All right, so who even are we? Well, I'm Tamala Gresham.
Oh, and I'm Simon. That's me. I'm Simon Mott. We're the co-founders of Harmonize.
As you can see, we're a little bit ridiculous, but we do have professional backgrounds in organizing, education, law, go Bears, restorative justice, business, and organizational development.
We are students of liberation theology, critical race theory, Black feminism, sociology, semantics, mysticism, and basically anything else that we can get our hands on. We are very much here for the woo of it all and also here for the groundedness.
You'll be getting both of those today. And we're also especially here for joy. One of our key success metrics is giggles per minute, which is why we have all the terrible puns. Go ahead, Simon.
Well, we've been doing facilitation and organizational development for about 30 years combined. And in our work, we've noticed the same problem over and over. The way that we're working together isn't really working. And it's recreating so many of the problems that we're trying to solve. So we co-founded Harmonize to help groups work together better for the collective good. And to do that, we coach, we train, and we steward organizations or deeper organizational change. We've stewarded more than 60 organizations through deep processes and trained more than 200 more. We've supported with almost every aspect of organizational activity that we can think of, from building new structures, developing bylaws, hiring and firing, conflict, culture, political education, strategic planning, skill building, and more.
But what does coaching, training, and stewarding organizations through change really have to do with the collective good, right? Why organizational development work? Well, we're passionate about this work, and we invited you all here not because we really enjoy drafting grievance policies or teaching people about white supremacy, but because we believe that groups of people working together is how we actually create deep change. It's good people doing good work together, and that's what creates the collective good, and we want to help.
Now, what is the collective good? There are so many different ways to refer to a shared vision that of something that we all know, but none of us can really fully articulate. Some of us call it liberation, some call it freedom or prosperity or thriving. We call it harmony.
So today we're going to tell you all about our vision of harmony, why and how we harmonize organizations, and how we hope that you will harmonize with us.
Now, harmony is the word that we use to refer to our vision of how humans can potentially inhabit the world. So let's start by getting grounded in what we mean when we use the word harmony. For us, harmony is an experience that all of us know, but that none of us can fully describe. Nearly all traditions and all cultures have some way of honoring and alluding to this ineffable experience. You've probably felt it at some point in your life. It may have been when you were getting lost in the perfection of a beloved's eyes, or when you were feeling individual voices dissolve and transcend and to become a unified choir. You may feel it when you laugh and smile after a long cry. It comes in many forms, and it often comes with a sense of everything having led to the moment that we're in, where there is nothing to change or resist, just things to be in awe of, regardless of what's happening. It can feel as if everything is somehow perfectly synchronized and imbued with meaning and beauty. And even though it comes in many forms and is impossible to truly describe, everyone here has some sense of precisely what we're talking about. And your bodies are probably remembering it just as I attempt to point to it right now. So there are many different imperfect ways to describe it and to point to it. Here's our imperfect attempt. Harmony is the sense of connection and alignment with ourself and with something greater at the same time. Now, our vision and our prayer is that humans can all have this sacred experience as often as possible. And we recognize that our individual experience doesn't just occur in a vacuum. We don't just envision people individually on the meditation cushion outside at harmony with the world. We envision a world that not only supports people to find this experience, but also a world that itself emerges from people creating and expressing from this experience.
And so that world looks like first, all humans being sovereign and being and creating in joy, in relationships that help us become, know, and love each of our truest selves, while we co create and realize shared visions of non-violently meeting the needs of all with regenerative, material, interdependent structures.
As we're united by shared stories that accurately reflect and imagine each of us as our most whole expression. And we co create with all of Earth's inhabitants and resources in reciprocal and regenerative relationships, while consciously connecting to spirit, ancestral, energetic, and archetypal realms, and more, and deriving meaning from our participation in creation and life as a whole.
So, this is obviously a really big vision. And so, harmony, then, like trees in a forest, is really going to require many groups working in concert. You can take us to the next slide, Austin. And so, to achieve this vision, we are relying on work like regenerative agriculture, indigenous resistance, community owned renewable energy, abolitionist alternatives, and so much more across every part of our movement. And so, though some of us are working together in concert, I think we can all agree that we're not experiencing as much harmony as we would like. Climate change isn't harmony, war isn't harmony, rising suicide rates aren't harmony, right? We're experiencing a lot of discord. And we think that is because the way that we're working together isn't actually working.
And not only is the dominant system not working, often our attempts to address a symptom of disharmony actually replicates the underlying causes of that disharmony. It could be Tesla building solar panels that reduce emissions, but leave their concentration of wealth and power intact. Or it could be marijuana being decriminalized only to have large investment interests displace Black farmers. Or maybe mental health workers burning out from stress and undercompensation. Underneath all of our attempts to remake the world seems to be this basic pattern that most of us learn how to work together from the very system that we're trying to change. So, in the attempt to create different outcomes, we actually remake the very same systems, which continues to trap us living in the system that we ourselves are creating and experiencing those outcomes. So we need more effective tools that can meet the deeper and systemic calls of our times. Thanks, Tessa, for the bump in the chat.
But if we're going to achieve harmony, we actually need more than just these tools to work together, right? Because human beings are the ones who are actually using the tools. And so who we are is actually going to impact how we use the tools together. And so because we are human, we work with our minds and bodies, right? We have to bring all of that to our work, all of the complexities of that. And so for us to work with others, we need to be able to navigate the complexities of actually being human, and then also then be able to see, share, and understand how to create the world that we want to live in together.
So for us to create this deeper way of working together, we need ways to be, ways to work together, and ways to see. To be, we need to figure out how to be a human with a body and a mind. To see, we need to understand and analyze the world as it is and to be able to cast a shared vision. And then to work together, we need practices, structures, and policies that'll enable us to collaboration. This enables us not only to work together, but to embody our shared vision of harmony as we do it. If the organization is a tree, then these being, seeing, and working together are the three strong branches needed to grow fruit.
Thanks, Simon. And this is simply beyond the scope of most organizational development work, right? And so that is why we created CODA, what we call Comprehensive Organizational Development and Analysis.
CODA is our suite of holistic, customizable tools, frameworks, processes, and practices to help groups create organizational alignment. And it's important to mention that these tools are as ancient as they are new. We understand ourselves to be engaged in a millennia old human inquiry of how do we inhabit this earth together. And we draw inspiration from people of many cultures and many times that have asked these questions before. We're here to offer a tree, but we know that the soil was here well before we planted the seed, and that our tree will eventually decompose and fuel the soil for the next tree someday. We also honor all of the other trees that are out there right now and offer ours in a hope that it meets some of the particular needs of this historical moment that we're in. Let's begin with the first branch, a way to work together. Now, our way to work together needs to be comprehensive, needs to address all the dimensions of an organization, congruent, needs to match form and function, conflict resilient, able to adapt and evolve through able to adapt and evolve through conflict. So we're going to double click into each of these. So for our work to be together to be comprehensive, we need to tend to all of the different dimensions of organizations. We understand there to be 10 basic dimensions of an organization. First is an analysis or cosmology. That's the shared ideology of the group. Then there's placement, which is where and how the group and its work is located. And that means geographically, inside of the movement ecosystem, their site of intervention and time and generation. Purpose, and the third thing is purpose, which is what the group is trying to achieve together. Fourth, culture, which is the assumptions, norms, and values that contribute to the social and psychological environment of the group. Structures, the formal arrangements of people and power and how the work is done.
And then there are also practices. So the ongoing day-to-day activities that enable the organization to actually function. And then we have processes, which are discrete time-bound tasks that have a clear beginning and an end. Think hiring someone or strategic planning or performance reviews that you do biannually, right? So after processes, then we have policies, right? The explicit group agreements and directives that a group makes together, including like a compensation policy, PTO, or your grievance policy or something like that. And then there's also the people who make up the organization. So who is in the group and what are their individual internal makeups? And then lastly, the 10th dimension of organizations, which is relationships, how individuals in the group connect and relate to each other. And so to harmonize, we need alignment across all 10 of these dimensions of organizations. So let's look at an example. I love a good case study. So a mid-sized training org asked us to help them find ways to work together that shared power and increased participation. And so they wanted a new operating model. We didn't just run a training on listening, right? Or just shift roles or provide training on facilitation, which are all things that we could have done. But instead, we saw that they were going to have to make artful shifts throughout the 10 dimensions of the organization. And so we helped them sharpen their analysis, get explicit about their purpose and placement, then really tend to the relationships of the group. And so that all of their choices were aligned. And for that, we used our tool called our compensation manual template. So
Collaboration.
our collaboration manual template. You have to forgive me, I'm a compensation nerd. So our collaboration manual template is just a list of topic areas that address all 10 dimensions of organizations. So you can understand how this is like a big, complex problem. But if you had a list, a template of all the things that you need to attune to inside of the organization, it's much easier to approach that intentionally and methodically.
Look at that link on the bottom, the collaboration manual template. So you can see all of the different topic areas, from things about, your your file sharing systems, to your deepest values, to your workflow management systems. In addition to being comprehensive and addressing all of the different dimensions, our work together also needs to be congruent. Now, unfortunately, and congruent between form and function. Unfortunately, there's no like out of the box right way to organize toward harmony. There is no single model of shared leadership, non-hierarchy, sociocracy, deep democracy, worker self-directed nonprofits, agile orgs, or whatever other buzzword is out there that is actually going to work for all situations in all circumstances. And that's because the way that we organize ourselves, the form, depends very much on what we're organizing ourselves to do, the function. For example, the system that we need to create to build widgets over and over and over again is very different than the system that we need to be able to develop youth leadership. To build widgets, we want something that's tightly controlled and mechanized systems. Now, harmony would require that the people inside these systems be treated with dignity, but it doesn't actually suggest that these people should have enormous amounts of creative freedom. The function requires them to fill a very specific part in their process over and over with precision so they can connect to other things, and to only challenge that process in very, very specific occasions. This is really different from developing youth leadership. That requires an entirely different form. In that circumstance, we need to be meeting people exactly where they're at, attuning to their particular thoughts and emotions, creating opportunities for them to expand and take risks, and often prioritizing giving them a platform to express or create over any other standard of what they should create. Building widgets and developing youth leadership require entirely different organizational systems. Now, one of these systems isn't better with a capital B, but there really is a better or worse fit for a particular function to be filled. So to harmonize, we need to fit the form, how we work together, with the function, what we're working together to do. And that needs to be congruent across all those different 10 dimensions of the organization. And to understand this, we're going to look at another case study. So somebody came, a small nonprofit, 4 staff, 10 board members, over 50 volunteers, a rapidly growing budget. It came to us in a moment of conflict and asked us to support with conflict engagement, as well as creating a process for decision making. What we saw was that the whole form of the organization wasn't a match for its function. And the inability to reckon with that was actually what was creating the conflict. The role of the board was unclear, unfocused, and unsustainable. It included governance and programs works, and some tasks that are traditionally held by paid staff or an executive director. Putting all that on the board that wasn't recruited based on the skills and capacities to do that work meant that they weren't really able to do it. The form of the board wasn't a match for the needs of the org. At the same time, there was this lean staffing structure that was focused mostly on supporting a volunteer base and funding the mutual aid network that they were running. Because they valued the idea of being volunteer-based, they were so responsive to volunteers that they didn't realize that also part of the function they needed was to create and manage a sustainable nonprofit infrastructure and financial management system. So the form of the staff structure wasn't a match for the overall functions that the organization needed to be able to pull off. As they were doing this, they really viewed themselves as being committed to a radical egalitarian and non-hierarchical politics, which is something that we tend to align with as well. But in this particular circumstance, the attempt to live out that idealized politics actually created a system that couldn't carry out its necessary functions.
Mhm.
We could have just come in and trained on decision-making processes or communication or listening, but that wouldn't have addressed the root cause. The root cause was that the form and function of the organization were not congruent, and everyone was living inside of that breakdown.
Mhm. So we didn't just need to offer them new tools, right? We needed to help people understand that they needed to solve for congruence. So we began by training folks on organizational development as a whole, increasing the precision of the group's analysis of the situation they were in, and offering tools to navigate the ideological complexities of the moment, and then offered good old-fashioned organizational development tools, right? Like circles and roles, right, which help us create a tailored way to distribute power and responsibility between the board, the staff, and the volunteers in the organization. And then also another CODA tool we used was our decision making engine, where we created a tailored way to propose and come to new agreements for the group. But even when what we create is comprehensive and congruent, whatever we build is going to have a limit. So we need to be able to adapt and evolve in response to any input that we get that the structure isn't working anymore. Otherwise, it's going to collapse. And so often we experience this input that the structure isn't working anymore as conflict. For example, we experience as staff requesting more pay or breakdowns in manager and managee relationships or increased turnover. And these conflicts can be like little earthquakes. And in those earthquakes, we can crumble or we can rise. So, adapting and evolving means riding the earthquake of conflict up to the top of that mountain. And from there, finding the transformative potential within it and then integrating that into the organizational structure. And that ability to adapt and evolve through tension is what we call conflict resilience.
What does that look like in practice, you might ask? Well,
Not waiting for the laugh, Simon.
I know there's no laugh. I can't. I'm just ridiculous to myself over here. All right. So, for example, we worked with a medium-sized nonprofit. Helped us. They came to us to help with a small team of staff who kept experiencing a pattern of conflict. This conflict, hurt feelings, and the inability to resolve key issues. Each person had their own sense of what was going on, stories about the issue, stories about each other. And after talking to them, we saw that underneath it, there was this fundamental misalignment on understandings of how race and respectability politics, and how individuals chose to navigate those constructs. So that meant that anytime they talked about an issue that implicated race or respectability politics, for example, how they should show up in an advocacy meeting with legislators, it would devolve into arguments and hurt feelings, even though no one could quite name that underneath it was identity, race, and respectability politics. So the very first thing that the group needed was an opportunity to process feelings and return to empathy and listening to each other. So for that, we offered our framework of discharge sessions that just allow people to get things out, speak and be heard. But that actually wasn't enough. They also needed to get on the same page about what the political disagreements were and how they could have those disagreements in good ways. So we offered political education to create new frames for the situation that they were in. And that still wasn't enough. They still needed ways to stay focused on specific decisions that needed to get made, like how to show up at the legislator's office, without devolving into a multi-hour conversation where they were processing all their thoughts and feelings about identity and respectability politics. So for that, we used our polarized conversation tool, which helps groups stay focused while understanding the whole context that they're inside of.
And so we created CODA for groups that need help working together in these ways, who are experiencing a lack of clear roles and processes that are causing confusion and inefficiency in the group, or there's conflict, a tense culture among staff with no real resolution in sight. And so we use CODA to create congruence and conflict resilience across all 10 dimensions of organizations using tools like our collaboration manual, our decision making engine, or our polarized conversation tool that Simon just described. And we take these tools and more into our actual work with groups, in our coaching, in our stewarding, in our training, right? To help them align across all dimensions of organizations. And then to train more groups at once, we're getting ready to launch our courses because conflict resilience is such a critical need, right? We have to be able to adapt and evolve whatever it is that we create. Our first course series is on conflict resilience.
Our conflict our conflict resilience curriculum teaches the tools, mindsets, and skills the groups need to harness the transformative power of conflict and to be able to stay the course of their missions. So our first course is building conflict resilient organizations. That's going to focus on creating the intention, the preparation, the practices and processes necessary to unlock transformative potential of conflict and stay functional while you're experiencing conflict. It's going to include tools like the conflict preparedness policies, and it's going to provide access to our whole tool set, which provides specific tools for specific moments in the arc of conflicts. Now, course 2, which is going to begin on May 28th and be every other Tuesday from there. Look at that, enroll now. Thanks, Austin. That's going to go deeper into tools like the reflection guides, the one-on-one conversation guides, group conversation guides, grievance templates, and our more politically informed evolution of nonviolent communication, which will set us up for course 3, the masterclass on conflict resilient frameworks. And that's going to take a deep dive into the mindsets and frameworks necessary as an individual level to meet conflict well. It's going to include tools for communication, for deepened self-awareness, intention setting, and understanding how conflict exists on the different, across the different dimensions of the organization.
But we know that harmony requires more than just those tools to be able to work together better, because it's people that are going to use these tools, and who we are influences how we use the tools and what it is that we want to create. So we also then need shared ways of being in order to actually achieve harmony. So, harmony is a sense of connection and alignment within ourselves and with something greater at the same time. And at root, we want to create towards and from this sense of connection and alignment within ourselves. And so, connection and alignment within ourselves means acting from a deeper place. And to do that, we actually have to be aware of that deeper place. Simon?
Harmony requires us to be able to make true choices. Now, of course, we make many choices throughout the course of our days, but many of the things that we think are choices are really just program responses to social pressure, trauma, internalized oppression, and more. And as long as we're doing that, we may have the illusion of freedom or choice, but we're really little more than actors playing characters without realizing that someone else has written the script. It's not going to get us to harmony. A true choice is one that's not just based on the behaviors that we've learned from those other sources. It's the ability to break free of those constraints and act from a different, deeper place. And that's something that we call inner sovereignty. The ability to choose how we relate to all of the potential scripts we might follow and to instead write a new one of our own. Of course, the first step on that journey is awareness. It's realizing which of our behaviors and our thought patterns, even our identities, are just scripts that are written by those social pressures, traumas, histories, or whatever else. Put simply, you can't break out of a prison that you don't know that you're inside of.
For example, how can I actually truly love myself if I'm in the process of still believing lies of anti-Blackness, misogyny, and misogynoir? I have to be aware that those things are there, how they're operating inside of me in order to be able to break free from them.
And we call the consciousness of our state, of consciousness of the state and the limits of our mind, body, soul in a particular moment, embodied awareness. The deeper the awareness, the deeper the potential for sovereignty. Put simply, embodied awareness helps us access our inner sovereignty, and inner sovereignty helps us access and express harmony.
I think it's time for another example.
Only we had an example. So, for example, we worked with a white manager who was having difficulty giving direct critical performance feedback to a Black direct report. The group had all the best personnel practices in place, but at the end of the day, when the white manager needed to give clear, direct, objective performance feedback to the Black person, they got caught in a haze of insecurity, fear, and contraction. And some of this related to how they were navigating dominant tropes of what it means to be anti oppressive or a good white person. Now, the manager in this moment not only had to identify which of her impulses might have been unconscious racism, but also which of her impulses might have arisen from such a fear of being racist that she wasn't able to be authentic and direct, which ironically is just another form of racialized treatment. So in order to meet this moment, we needed to use things like our tool of a map of the self. So the map of the self that we use helps us differentiate from our core self, our vulnerability, and our protections so that we can make more intentional decisions. That core self is the one that can really meet the moment. The vulnerability field is where we carry the wounded parts that we sometimes act out. And the protective field is where we carry the patterns that we use to prevent us from getting wounded. So this helped us inquire into how her attempt to not be racist might also be connected to an attempt to protect her from discomfort. In addition, we use things like our nervous system state and reaction map, which helps people orient in real time to what's happening in their bodies and shift from reacting to their bodies to acting from an integrated embodied experience. This helps us inquire into things like how the person may have entered a conversation in a state of panic or collapse and could access new possibilities by finding more embodied resource. Developing embodied awareness and inner sovereignty lets us do so much. It allows us to determine our values by differentiating between our real values and the values we've adopted from various social pressures or frameworks. Find our integrity by knowing who we really want to be when we're not over responding to fear or pain. To navigate conflict by finding transformative choices in tight spaces, and to pursue connection and alignment with something greater. Basically, to become more whole. And as we find more wholeness in ourselves, we can bring that wholeness to work with each other.
So we offer coaching and training on these tools specifically, and more to the point, these tools and the general project of awareness and sovereignty underlie everything that we do with groups. So sometimes this looks like working with people to find more awareness and sovereignty in the moment. And sometimes it looks like trying to shift the dynamics inside of organizations to make that awareness and sovereignty more accessible to people who can't quite find it given current circumstances. And all of this is really about helping people bring their whole selves to work, not just the most traumatized parts of themselves, right? But their whole selves, which includes not only the trauma, but also the capacity to be present to it and find new generative choices within it. And so these themes are woven deeply into our conflict resilience courses. We're going to dip our toes into it during course 1. We'll explore some practical tools in course 2, and then get further into the theoretical foundations in course 3. Whew. All right, Simon, that's a lot. So we've got a shared way to be human while working together. But we know that harmony requires even more than that. Because once we're working together, we need a shared way of seeing our vision and our work, right? So we need a way of seeing. And ours includes a map and a little lens. And so we'll get started with that map. All right. So harmony is about the ability to connect to the self and something greater at the same time. We've said this a bunch of times now. And we've talked about how to connect to the self, right? Which is that personal layer, which is our individual actions and beliefs. But what about that connection to the something greater? And there are lots of something greaters that we could be connected to, right? So that next layer beyond the personal is the interpersonal layer, which is relationships between individuals, right? So like the relationship between me and Simon, or Simon and I and the folks and all of you who are here right now in the chat, right? Then there's the next layer, that organizational layer, where you have many individuals united with a common purpose. This can be a family, a state government, right? All kinds of different ways of people coming together with a common purpose. And then our next layer is the system level, which is where networks of organizations really solidify, and they're so big that they impact the material reality of large populations. And then beyond that level, you've also got the ideological level, right? Where there's commonly held beliefs and stories within a society. This is that place of stereotypes, of the ideas of white supremacy and patriarchy, right? Then beyond that ideological level, then we've actually got the world, the earth, the rock we're hurtling through space on, right? And all the beings and physical realities on this planet. And then that's not it. Then we've got another layer, which is all, right? That spirit, ancestral, cosmological, energetic, archetypal realms, and more, right? That stuff that we can't see but feel and we know it impacts us. And then beyond that, you've got even another layer, which is the source, right? That ineffable thing from which all of these other layers spring. All right. So there's a lot going on and a lot of layers where we need to create connection and alignment. And this is the scale that we have to see on. And we call it the scale of harmony. There's so many puns in there, you guys, but really the layers of human connection. So our map of the nested dimensions of human relationships charts out the different orders of scale of human relationships, including the something greater with that capital S that we've been alluding to the entire time. And it's important to note that all of these layers are something greater with a lowercase s, and the source, right, is that something greater with that capital S that harmony really requires us to connect to. And so all of these layers also create and are created by one another to create even more complexity. It's like a fractal within a fractal, which is Simon's favorite thing in the world. Okay, and when we start to see their interrelationships, we can better understand what is happening and then what we can do about it. And so that's why we have this map. We use this tool to actually see the whole picture of what's going on inside of a group on all of the different layers, right? Like, is someone having some sort of personal trauma that they're working through? Are two people beefing and they've got interpersonal drama? Are there structures on the organizational level that aren't working? Are we contending with external systems like late stage capitalism inside of our organization? And that's also creating the issue, right? And then to see what's happening inside of the organization, once we've done that, then we also use this map to figure out where to intervene inside of the organization. So we have our map, but what about our lens? We're trying to create connection and alignment across 8 nested layers of human connection, from the personal all the way up to the source. How do we even begin to align at this scale, right? It's a big task. We need a lens that allows us to see the primary forces at play and then understand what we need to shift to increase overall harmony. And Simon's going to tell us what it
A
is.
lens, also something like kind of like a tuner. I have to say though, I didn't get the scale of harmony pun
Oh, you
until
didn't.
that was good. So we need to be able to see and shape the fundamental forces of how humans work together. We can't just tinker with symptoms of problems. We actually need to be able to reach down to the core dynamics that create not just discord, but also harmony. Those are the core dynamics that underlie human creation so that we can shift that. And this is what allows us to not only do different things, but to do things differently. Our lens helps us identify and talk about 3 fundamental forces that we think are underneath how humans are co-creating with each other and with all other things in the world: power, belonging, and justice. Power is the ability to make choices and to exert influence over the self and others. Belonging is the state and experience of safety and legitimacy when using power in groups, as well as the access to the abundance created by a group's use of power. Justice is the creation of dignity and choicefulness for all people and beings through both the repair of historical misuses and also the ongoing rearrangement of power and belonging. So, put simply, power, who's doing what and who can do what. Belonging, how are we forming groups? Who's in, who's out, who gets access, who doesn't get access? And justice is how are these things shaping and impacting dignity and the ability to make choices for all different beings. So to create, we need power. To create together, we need belonging. And to create harmony, we need justice. One way to understand this is as an evolution of the DEI framework, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's a framework that has much value and that many folks who are aligned with some of its underlying values also see the practical limitations of. So we can understand it as that. We can also understand it as coming in on a whole different level. We're not just centering HR metrics, though PBJ can definitely help develop HR metrics, but instead we're increasing our awareness of how collaboration really happens and how process impacts outcome.
It's time for an example.
I wonder if we have an example. Okay. As an example, so a group of people from different positions in government, philanthropy, community-based organizations, and movements came to us looking for help creating a governance and decision-making system. But using our map, we were able to see deeper than that. We could see that different people and different approaches were exerting different forms of power, and that there was a constant fear of being excluded from belonging that was limiting the group's ability to operate harmoniously and strategize toward justice. Certain things, people were afraid to say them, even though they were really important to say because they were afraid of getting excluded from belonging. So there's power, belonging, and justice issues. There's also issues on all of those different dimensions. So on a personal level, people were navigating the contradictions of existing inside of capitalism, their internal sense of identity issues, and their level of commitment to the organization. Interpersonally, there was trust breakdowns and people were navigating the positionality between different roles across the movement. The interpersonal dynamics that come when we have a direct service provider and a government institution in the same representative of a government institution in the same room together. Organizationally, there was an unclear governance structure, an absence of clear purpose and tactics and decision making. All of this was also inside of a system. So these are people in different positions inside of a healthcare crisis that are trying to change the flow of money and power inside of the healthcare system. And that was itself was structuring the relationships that they had with one another. And then ideologically, there was alignment on general principles about what this healthcare part of the healthcare system should look like, but disagreement about the application and conflict around complexities and nuance of how we operate in integrity with our values inside of this environment. Then on a world level, everybody's in a different area experiencing climate chaos, experiencing scarcity in these different forms. And because of what's happening like on a kind of on a pandemic level and the shifting forms of how we relate to Earth inside of work, everybody's on Zoom, which that's a whole nother dynamic. And then on the all in source levels, there's a little more nuance to be able to talk about, but like on an all level, like Mercury stays in retrograde, right? Things are going on. We could talk about them. We cannot talk about them. And then our relationship to source and kind of the sense of the all and how we relate to just fundamentally that which provides health in relationships of navigating the healthcare system. That's a whole nother thing. So in order to intervene, we need to use our entire CODA toolset to figure out, hang on, which dimension of the organization do we need to work? And how do we cultivate embodied awareness and sovereignty? And how do we tinker with power and belonging and justice? That is way more than like a new organizational structure.
Yes. And that is exactly why we use CODA, right? When groups are experiencing complex issues that are swirling around themes of power and identity, or issues so big that it's really unclear what to do or where to even start, or issues that they can feel but can't really name, right? Those are the key moments where we want to use CODA to see and shape how organizations work together in and toward harmony. And so obviously we coach, train, and steward on these specific tools, and they're embedded in how we steward. But ultimately, we do this work because harmony requires many groups working in what? Concert.
Oh, wow.
Cha-ching.
That was written, it must have been pre-orchestrated.
Always. Okay, so the more, and by this we mean the more each group can be, see, and work together better within their own organization from their place in the movement, then the better each group can see their role in the broader movement, right? And see the larger picture, our efforts inside of it, and the gaps that are in it. All of those become more clear. And then the better these groups can then strategize and coordinate to work in concert to attune PBJ across all of the layers of human connection in order to create harmony on all of the different levels, including, they're about to come at you fast, source, then there's all, then world, ideological, system, organizational, interpersonal, all the way to us personally, right? And so if we carefully arrange PBJ across these particular nested layers, we can achieve our nested vision of harmony. You see what we did there? It's on each of the layers. Sorry, that's really exciting for me.
Yeah, that was hard for you to do it backward, I feel like, but you did it. It was pitch perfect.
Thank you.
Pitch. All right. All right. So to harmonize, we need to work together, and we need to not only work together inside of our own organizations, but also across organizations in order to form new systems and ultimately across all the different layers of human connection in order to create new possibilities. That's going to be like a team effort. So if you, your groups, or others that you know need help working together for the collective good, you can connect with us. We do offer coaching, stewardship, and training on basically everything that we just talked about and more. Then also we're coming out with courses right now about, the first one is building conflict resilient organizations. Then coming later is going to be the conflict tool set and the deeper mindsets, the masterclass mindsets. And next week, there's an intro to conflict resilience session. It's just a free thing. We're going to overview all of the different details so you can decide if that is right for you. But alas, what we're doing is actually deeper than that. Coaching, stewardship, and training is what the current expression of something that we're more interested in doing. Which what we really want to do is be able to recruit additional facilitators, curriculum creators, researchers, and strategists so that we can serve as a home base to further develop and implement our vision of harmony. Everything that we just talked about, we don't consider comprehensive and perfect and done. What we hope is that it's a useful overarching framework to create a language for people to talk to together, and that actually carries with it the tools to be able to implement that at various different scales. We also want to be able to provide a centralized place for accessible holistic support. There's a lot of people out there that are carrying different parts of the puzzle and that need to come together around this question of, well, how do we work together? So we're hoping to be able to create a bed of accessible support for those people. Overall, to be able to create an integrated system that can coordinate movements and cultivate elders over time. By cultivating elders, we mean the consistent and responsible engagement with this question of how do we be together, so that the constancy of the engagement and experience can cultivate an embodied sense of wisdom and an embodied sense of knowledge that then we can share with each other. So please talk to us.
We don't bite. We're good.
Our friends. So here's the kind of specific things that we're hoping. Talk to us. So in the survey that we're going to send, there's going to be questions. Answer them. We'll follow up with you. Connect us with others. We know that other people are holding key parts of this vision. We know there's other people that you know that we need to be in relationship with for all the different reasons. Please tell us. Join our courses. We think they're great. Organizations, you can have us come to the organizations and do this. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn, and please give us feedback. We're going to send you a survey now. Also, I just have to say props to Austin, who just low-key before this, we decided he had to do for a technological reason, he had to do all of the slides. So he's been trying to hack all of the troubleshoot while also keeping up with the slides. So thank you, Austin. Amazing.
Doing a great job. Yes. And in the short survey, remember, there's going to be a question for you to be able to guess how many ridiculous music puns that we made. And I'm just going to give you a hint now. Every time we say harmonize counts. And so you can get whoever gets the closest without going over, right, has a chance to get
Price of Right rules?
went into one of our courses.